Archbishop Pendergrast, Bishop Reisbeck, thank you for welcoming me to your diocese. It's a joy to be in Ottawa. It's also a joy to be speaking specifically about the new evangelization. I want to begin with a story. When I was a little boy, Saturday mornings, we all knew there was going to be brunch. And inevitably, I would sleep in and be awakened by the smell of bacon. American bacon. I think we'd all agree American bacon smells better than Canadian bacon. Come on. There's much more fat in American bacon. Have you ever been awakened, literally you're asleep, and awakened by a smell? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, how about bacon? Anybody been awakened by bacon? All right. So I'd be up in my bed, and the smell of bacon would waft from the kitchen, up the stairs, into my bedroom, up my nostrils, and what is actually happening is that little physical fragments of bacon fat are floating through the air from the kitchen, up the stairway, into my bedroom, under the door, and up my nostrils. And they tickle little sensory organs in my nose, and they woke me up. But just smelling the bacon was not enough. What did smelling the bacon do? It aroused a hunger. So it was time to get out of bed and follow the fragrance of the bacon out of my bedroom, down the steps, to the kitchen, to the table, and enjoy the feast. What does this have to do with my talk tonight? Nothing. No, actually, everything. Tonight, we're talking about, and this whole conference, we're talking about the new evangelization. And I want to borrow a phrase from Pope Francis, which I love. We must exude, he says, the fragrance of the gospel. The fragrance of the gospel. In the modern world, somewhere along the line, we have lost the fragrance of the gospel. It's still there, but it needs to be recovered. And I want to talk tonight about a movement that I believe was launched with the Second Vatican Council, was confirmed deeply in the pontificates of Pope Paul VI, John Paul II, especially in his theology of the body and the Catechism of the Catholic Church, confirmed deeply by Pope Benedict XVI, and now I would say in a certain sense it is culminating in the pontificate of Pope Francis. And it's this idea of recovering the fragrance of the gospel. And another way to put it would be this: returning to our Christian roots and rediscovering the fundamental truth that ours is not a religion of law, primarily. It is primarily a religion of longing. Ours is not primarily a religion of law. It is primarily a religion of longing. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, which not only presents to us a magnificent unfolding of our Catholic faith, but also the manner in which to present it to the world. Do you know how the Catechism begins? Follow all of these laws or you're going to hell. No. The Catechism begins, look it up, chapter 1 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the first paragraph in chapter 1, part 1, begins with a beautiful, magnificent reflection on this. Do we have... Yes, we do. This is where the Catechism begins. Are you ready? desire, desire, burning, it's burning. My brothers and sisters, the Catechism of the Catholic Church begins with the reflection on desire. Desire for what? St. Augustine said it best. You have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until we rest in you. If we grow up thinking Christianity is primarily a religion of law and not primarily a religion of longing, what we end up with is not only a caricature of Christianity, but a terribly skewed vision of our faith that is not only disconnected from what we really feel and experience in life, but it actually ends up being very harmful to our humanity. Now, hear me correctly. Let's just quote directly from Christ. I've not come to abolish the law, I've come to fulfill the law. So none of what I have to say here is about throwing the law away. Pope Francis just came out with a beautiful, beautiful document on marriage and family life called The Joy of Love. And the internet is a frenzy right now, thinking somehow Pope Francis is throwing away the law. No. He's not throwing away the law. He's quoting directly here from Pope John Paul II. And he's speaking about the law of gradualness, which is not to be confused with the gradualness of the law. Okay, here's God's law. God's law never changes. God's law is God's law. In the beginning, before sin corrupted our hearts, here was the human heart, perfectly united with God's law. When the law is written on the heart, the law of God wells up from within. Everybody with me there? When the law is written on the heart, we don't need the law. The law doesn't feel like a burden imposed on us. It wells up from within. Let me just pick on somebody here. You're a married man?
Sure
is this your wife right here?
It is.
What's your name?
Dave.
Dave and
Helen.
Helen. Can I?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't speak French. I'm terrible. Can I call you Helen? Is that okay? Terrible American. Can't speak French. David and Helen. David, not a trick question. Do you have any desire to murder your wife, Helen?
No.
Good answer. Good answer. Dave says he does not desire to murder his wife. Dave, do you need the commandment, thou shalt not murder thy wife?
No.
What does he need that commandment for? Here's God's commandment not to murder your wife, and here's Dave's heart, or at least pretty close, right? Right? When the law is written on the heart, it doesn't feel like a burden. Helen, have you ever seen Dave pounding his fists, saying, who are those old celibate men in Rome to tell me I can't murder my wife? What do they know about marriage anyway? Why don't they just stay out of my relationship? Have you ever witnessed such a thing? No, and I wouldn't think so. And here's why. We only desire to break the law when our hearts are not in conformity with it. Or let's put it this way. The law only feels like a burden when we desire to break it. To the degree that our hearts are in conformity with the law, we don't need the law. We are free from the law. Not free to break the law, free to fulfill the law because the law is written on the heart. Are you following me there? Here's the law of gradualness. Here's why we need a law of gradualness. Not the gradualness of the law. Here's God's law. Here's the human heart in the beginning. But with the dawn of sin, here's what happened. There's been a rupture between God's law and our hearts. Evangelization is not claiming we can live this on our own and look at us, look how holy we are, and then we get to thumb our noses at everybody who's way over here who can't live it, because we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. Broken human beings whose hearts have been fractured from our true humanity, from God's law for us. God's law is meant for our fulfillment. God's law is meant for our delight. God's law is meant to lead us to our destiny of ecstasy in union with God forever. That's God's law. It's a law of love. But our hearts have been fractured. We've been separated from God. The law of gradualness is the recognition that the journey of the human heart back to God's law, we grow in stages. That's the law of gradualness. Everybody with me there? This is what Pope Francis is talking about. The gradualness of the law means we bring the law down to the level of our own weakness. That's not the gospel. We don't water down the truth of our humanity. We don't water down the truth of God's law. Rather, we proclaim in all its grandeur and fullness the power of grace to heal us in this direction. But in order to understand this direction we all must go in, we must understand Christianity is not primarily a religion of law, it is a religion of longing. When we reduce Christianity to a religion of law, you inevitably get two warring camps within the church. Those who are too rigorous and those who are too lax. The rigorous says, well, this is the law, and we're going to follow it to the letter, and anybody who doesn't do it just like we do, well, they're all going to hell. The person who's too lax says, that's the law. Who can live that? It's too hard. And we break the law and we encourage others to do the same. Now, who is being actually more honest? Those who think they can live the law and then impose it on everyone else? Or those who admit they can't? Who's being more honest? Those who admit they can't. My brothers and sisters, we are all in a dilemma as human beings. God holds something out to us that we of our own strength, of our own ability, cannot fulfill. St. Augustine says it very well. The law was given so that grace might be sought. In other words, the law is given to show me what I'm called to, but also in seeing what I'm called to, I should, in my humility, recognize I'm not there. I'm not there, and I can't get myself there. The law was given so that grace might be sought, Augustine says. And grace was given so that the law might be fulfilled. Grace is the good news of the gospel. Grace, the power to transform the heart inwardly, to redirect our desires according to God's design so we can reach our destiny. That's what Christianity is all about. That's the power of grace. We already had the law without Jesus. If Christianity is primarily a religion of law, why do we need Jesus? We already had the law. Christianity is primarily a religion of longing. Why? Because Christianity, the grace that we get through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the whole reason Christ died on a cross, rose from the dead, was to redirect our hearts towards the love that really satisfies the yearning of the heart. Salvation is salvation from misdirected desire. Oftentimes, desire in the Christian life is considered an enemy of the Christian life. Now, disordered desire often leads us astray. Well, disordered desire always leads us astray. But that does not mean desire itself is the problem. I grew up deeply in touch with this ache of my soul, profoundly aware that I was hungry for something. I was looking for something. I'll never forget the first time I felt this ache, this longing. I was 8 years old. I was lying in my bed, and Bruce Springsteen comes on the radio. This is the 70s. Anybody know Bruce Springsteen's anthem from the 70s, Born to Run? Anybody know that song? Springsteen is singing about this place he wants to go. He's looking for something. He's yearning for something. And the girl in the song, her name is Wendy. Well, years later, I would marry a woman named Wendy. This song is like a prophecy of my whole life. And at the end of the song, he says to Wendy, he says, someday, girl, I don't know when, we're going to get to that place where we really want to go, and we'll walk in the sun. But till then, tramps like us, baby, we were born to run. And then, who was that over there who just shouted that out? Chris, that was awesome. High five. That was awesome. At the end of the song, Springsteen just cracks open his rib cage and he lets this cry come out of his heart. And if you'll permit me, it went something like this. Whoa, oh, 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 whoa, oh, 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 whoa, whoa, oh, 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 oh. I was lying in my bed, and it's like the ceiling cracked open above my bed, and I'm staring into the universe, and something ginormous just rumbled through my soul. I felt an ache for something infinite. But here's the tragedy. In my Christian upbringing, nobody connected the dots for me between that ache and God. In fact, all people could do was condemn Bruce Springsteen. Now, there are things about Springsteen that I'm not going to endorse. I'm not here to baptize Bruce Springsteen. But I am here to affirm his ache. That's where all evangelization begins. With an affirmation of the ache, of the yearning, of the hungry heart that every human being has. But if religion is presented primarily as a list of rules to follow, not only is the ache not affirmed, the basic message is the ache and the desire is bad. It's only going to get you in trouble. You got to repress that. You got to deny that. You got to erase that. But follow all these rules, and you'll be a good, upstanding Christian citizen. That was the message that I heard growing up in the church. I call that the starvation diet gospel. Follow all these rules and repress your hunger. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. No wonder the culture's fast food gospel starts to look so attractive. And that's the culture's promise of immediate gratification of the desire. Are you following me here? If you're raised on the starvation diet, eventually the desire you feel, the hunger, the ache, the thirst, the longing that you feel inside becomes so overwhelming that even though you were told over and over and over, don't go to that fast food, it's bad, you're going to get in trouble, eventually the hunger becomes so overwhelming you can't say no. I mean, come on, be honest with me. If the only two choices for the hunger are the starvation diet or the fast food, I don't know about you, but I'm going for the nuggets. Because I'm hungry. I'm hungry. And so in my teenage years, I went for the nuggets. I went for them. And don't lie to me, they tasted good going down. When you are hungry, I don't care if it's junk food, it tastes good. But sure enough, if that becomes your diet, what happens eventually? Oh, I don't feel good. Anybody seen the movie Super Size Me? It's a documentary of a guy who eats McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 30 days to see what would happen to him. At the end of this documentary, he goes and gets these medical tests. His body's shutting down. He's dying from all the grease and the sodium. That's a picture of me in my college years, spiritually speaking. Having eaten all that fast food, yeah, it tasted good going down, but the effect of it was, oh, I don't feel good. And I remember getting on my knees in a college dorm in 1988 and saying, God in heaven, if you exist, you better show me why you gave me all these desires, because they're getting me and everybody I know into a hell of a lot of trouble. What is your plan? Do you have a design for my desires? Jesus said, seek and you will find. Right there. Do you see Jesus' appeal to desire? Seek and you will find. First words out of the mouth of Jesus in the Gospel of John. Anybody know what they are? What are you looking for? Other translations say, what do you want? Jesus probes our hearts with this question. And who wrote that gospel? John the Evangelist. Right? He's teaching us how to evangelize. How does Jesus evangelize? He asks people, what are you looking for? I once heard it put this way: evangelization is one hungry person telling another hungry person where to find bread. Seek and you'll find. So I'm a college student. I'm hungry. I took my hunger to the wrong place. I got burned. I cried out to God, and now I'm seeking. There's got to be something else. There's got to be something else. In 1993, I discovered the teaching of a crazy Polish guy. Maybe you've heard of him. St. John Paul II. This crazy Polish pope put his finger on the deepest ache of my soul, of my being. And I felt like he was talking right to me, and in a way he was. I felt like he was saying, Christopher, that desire has a name. And he told me it's called eros. Eros, E-R-O-S. Eros. What English word do we get from that Greek word eros? Erotic. Now, in our post-sexual revolution pornographic culture, that word erotic has gotten terribly twisted up. John Paul II says, Christ came into the world. This is not a direct quote, but this is what his teaching holds out to us. Christ came into the world to untwist what sin has twisted. We got to keep this in mind, my brothers and sisters. So important. The devil does not have his own clay. What does that mean, and why is it important? All sin can do is take God's clay, and God looked at everything he made and said, behold, it is very good. All sin can do, all the enemy can do is take God's very good clay and twist it up. Salvation is not throwing that twisted clay away. Salvation is untwisting that twisted clay so we can reclaim who we really are. Salvation is about redirecting our desires, not squashing them, not suffocating them, not repressing them. It's about redirecting our desires according to God's design so we can reach our destiny. I call it living in 3D. Redirecting our desire according to God's design so we can reach our, let's say that one more time. Redirecting our according to God's so we can reach our destiny. This is what Christianity is all about. Again, this is my image, but I get the idea from John Paul's teaching. I like to say God gave us eros to be like the fuel of a rocket that has the power to launch us towards the stars, to infinity and beyond. But what would happen if those rocket engines became inverted? Set that rocket off, and what's going to happen? Crash and burn. That's what happened with original sin. Christ comes into the world not to condemn those with inverted rocket engines. He comes to redirect our rocket engines towards the stars. John Paul II was the first to tell me that ache, that longing I felt since I was a little kid, that passion and desire, that God gave it to me to lead me to Him. Eros is a yearning for the infinite, my brothers and sisters. It's a yearning for God. Pope Benedict says Eros is the desire in us that seeks God. I knew when I was 23 years old that Christianity, I discovered in John Paul II's teaching, was not a starvation diet. And the fast food was not what I was looking for. It was Christ that I was looking for. Because Christianity is an invitation to a wedding feast. A wedding feast that is the fulfillment of all our deepest and most wild yearnings and longings. All the saints talk about this passion and yearning and desire. Let me quote from Saint Therese of Lisieux. She says, "I know, O my God, that the more you want to give, the more you make us desire. I feel in my heart immense desires. My desires and longings reach even unto infinity. And I know that Jesus would not inspire the longings I feel unless He wanted to grant them. For God cannot inspire unrealizable desires." God cannot inspire unrealizable desires. Pope Benedict says this, Psalm 63 helps us to enter into the heart of the matter. Here's Psalm 63. "O God, my God, for you I long at the break of day. My soul thirsts for you. My body pines for you, like a dry land without water." Pope Benedict goes on, "Not only my soul, but even every fiber of my flesh is made to find its fulfillment in God. And this tension, this yearning, this cry of the heart cannot be erased from man's heart. For this aching desire is like a signature imprinted with fire in our soul and our body by the Creator Himself." My brothers and sisters, Christianity is an invitation not to the squashing or annihilation of our yearnings and desires, but to their deepest, most profound and sacred fulfillment. Christianity proclaims, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst." Our religion is not primarily a religion of law. It is a religion primarily of longing. Have we been too much of a rigorist? Have we just been out there throwing rules at people and condemning others because they don't live the way we do? Or have we gone to the other extreme and been too lax? Have we said, "Oh, that's not a sin, don't worry about it, that's no big deal"? Either one of those come from a certain obsession with the law and a failure to recognize Christ comes to get us in touch with our longings. Pope Francis says it very well. I quote directly from him. "We, the women and men of the church, we are in the middle of a love story. Each of us is a link in this chain of love. And if we do not understand this, we have understood nothing of what the church is." He goes on to say, "God and God alone can fulfill the human longing for love." Pause. That ache I felt when I was 8 years old and that Springsteen song came on, it was a longing for God. A longing that God and God alone can fulfill. Nobody connected the dots for me between that longing and God. What I was learning in religion class actually made me want to run the other way. God and God alone can fulfill the human longing for love. This is the first proclamation of the gospel, Pope Francis says. This is what must ring out over and over again, Pope Francis says. We must hear it again and again at every level and moment of Christian formation. Only the message of God's infinite love is capable of responding to the desire for the infinite which abides in every human heart. My brothers and sisters, we have three choices with that ache. We have three choices with that desire. We will either become a stoic, an addict, or an aspiring mystic. What do I mean? What does the stoic do with desire? Repress, 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 repress. What does the addict do with desire? Indulge, indulge, indulge. Let me give you a theological definition of addiction. Addiction happens when I take my desire for the infinite to something finite. If indeed this yearning and ache and longing is a yearning for the infinite and I take it to something finite, does it satisfy? So what do I think I need? More. I go and I get more. Does it satisfy yet? So what do I think I need? More. I go and I get more. Does it satisfy yet? This is not a life of happiness. This is a life of addiction and despair. Stoic, addict. If those are the only two choices, who wins? The life of the addict is what's promoted in our culture because the culture thinks these are the only two options. And if there is no transcendent reality, if there is no resurrection, if there's no other world, if there's no mystical life, St. Paul's very clear on this. He says if the resurrection is not real, if this Jesus stuff isn't real, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. What he's saying in my vocabulary is if the only two choices are the starvation diet or the fast food, then go for the nuggets, have fun, that's all you get. But if there's a banquet, if there's an infinite feast that corresponds to the infinite yearning, then we don't need to repress desire on the one hand, nor do we need to settle for finite pleasures. We can aspire to the mystical life. Now here, let's be careful. I don't mean we're all going to get the stigmata like Padre Pio. Right? We hear the word mystic, and we think Padre Pio and Francis of Assisi and Teresa of Avila, and sure enough, they're some of the greatest mystics who ever lived. They experienced what the Catechism describes as the extraordinary signs of the mystical life. Stigmata, bodily levitations, visions, ecstasies, those kinds of things. But the Catechism goes on to say, we're all called to an ordinary kind of mystical life. It's the life of prayer. It's the life of the sacraments. What is the life of prayer? Pope Benedict tells us, drawing from the fathers of the church, he says, the fathers of the church tell us that prayer is nothing but becoming a longing for God. That's the mystical life right there. What's the sacramental life? It's the food for the journey. The sacramental life is where we get foretastes, even here on planet Earth, of the heavenly realities. Let's go to the source and summit of all the sacraments, the Eucharist. Dream with me for a moment, my brothers and sisters. Dream with me. Imagine God loved us so much that his deepest hunger and thirst was to satisfy our deepest hunger and thirst. If that were real, if that were true, again, we wouldn't need to repress our desires, nor settle for finite pleasures that come and go. We could learn how to open that ache and longing for the infinite, to the infinite, totally confident that the infinite was coming to us to satisfy the longing. Come to me, all you who are hungry and thirsty. Come to me. Come to me. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, for they shall be satisfied. They shall be satisfied. Imagine God loved us so much. I don't know, just dream. You got to stretch really big here, but just dream with me. Imagine God loved us so much that he actually became food that we could actually take into us and eat. Imagine infinity became food. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be awesome? It is awesome. It's happened. If what we believe is real, then in every tabernacle on the planet, we have the promise of everlasting satisfaction for the ache and yearning and hunger and thirst. If the Eucharist is real, we have a song to sing to Bruce Springsteen in his hungry heart. Remember Springsteen's other song, Everybody's Got a Hungry Heart, right? Well, if everybody's got a hungry heart, we also have to ask, why can't Mick Jagger get no satisfaction? This man tries, and he tries, and he tries, and he tries. If the Eucharist is real, we have a song to sing to Bruce Springsteen in his hungry heart. We have a song to sing to Mick Jagger in his search for satisfaction. It goes like this, and if you know it, sing along with me. You satisfy the hungry heart with gift of finest wheat. Come give to us, soul saving Lord, the bread of life to eat. If the Eucharist is real, then we got to go tell the whole world. But we won't know what the Eucharist is unless we're in touch with our hunger. If we're in touch with our hunger and we believe in the Eucharist, then we can go out into the world, one hungry person telling other hungry persons where to find bread. And what kind of feast is this? It's a wedding feast. Why a wedding feast? The Bible uses many images to describe God's love. But the image the Bible uses far more than any other is the image of marriage. From beginning to end, the Bible tells a story about marriage. It begins in Genesis with our creation as male and female and the call of the two to become one flesh. Throughout the Old Testament, God speaks of his love for his people as the love of a husband for his bride. In the New Testament, the love of the eternal bridegroom is literally embodied when the Word is made flesh. Skip to the end of the story. The book of Revelation describes heaven. How? As a wedding feast. Who gets married in heaven in the book of Revelation? Christ and the church. Look at the two bookends of the Bible. Begins with the marriage of man and woman, ends with the marriage of Christ and the church. John Paul II, in his theology of the body, is simply unfolding for us, for the modern world, what saints have been trying to tell us for centuries. And here it is in a nutshell. You can summarize the whole Bible in 5 words. Again, not a direct quote from John Paul II, but my summary of his teaching. Here it is. Whole Bible in 5 words. You ready? God wants to marry us. And guess what? We want to marry him. That's what the ache is. That's what eros is. It's a yearning for the eternal marriage. The Bible begins with the marriage of man and woman, but it ends with the marriage of Christ and the church. Which one of these two marriages is our ultimate satisfaction? The marriage of man and woman or the marriage of Christ and the church? The marriage of Christ and the church. This is why Jesus says in the resurrection, we are no longer given in marriage. Why? What's the purpose of marriage? What's the purpose of the union of man and woman here on planet Earth? That's the natural dimension. Certainly, God wants us to be fruitful and multiply. But we're not rabbits, right? You cannot compare human reproduction to the reproduction of animals. What is God holding out to us? Why did He make us male and female? Why did He call the two to become one flesh? For the union, the life-giving union, it is a life-giving union. We cannot separate it from the call to generate. My brothers and sisters, when we separate masculinity and femininity from generation, we have no understanding of what gender is. Look at that little root word, gen, G-E-N. What does it indicate? Same root as in the words Genesis, generous, generate, progeny, genealogy. It means to produce, to give birth. Your gender means the manner in which you generate. Well, there are only two ways to do that, as a father or as a mother. So in the midst of all this sexual craziness and confusion in the world today, these words of Jesus cut through all that confusion like a knife when He says, haven't you read that in the beginning God made them male and female and called the two to become one flesh? Why did God make us male and female and call the two to become one flesh? St. Paul tells us in Ephesians chapter 5 when he says, this is a great mystery. What is? Our creation as male and female in the call of the two to be one flesh. This is a great mystery, he says. And it refers to Christ and the church. Could we get the unity cross up here for a moment, please? Have you ever seen this artistic rendition of the crucifixion? Any Bishop Fulton Sheen fans out there? Here's how Fulton Sheen puts it. Do you know what's happening at the foot of the cross? Nuptials, I tell you, nuptials. Nuptials. You know what nuptials are? It's the union of the bridegroom and the bride. Where are we headed? What's our ultimate destiny? It's the marriage of Christ and the church in the book of Revelation. That's where we're all headed. And that marriage was consummated on what St. Augustine calls the marriage bed of the cross. Fulton Sheen says, who is at the foot of the cross? And what does he call her? Woman. Whenever Jesus calls Mary woman, we're at a wedding. Where else does he call her woman? The wedding feast of Cana. At the foot of the cross, Mary is the symbol of the church. The Baltimore Catechism puts it this way. In the flesh, she is his mother. But in the spirit, she is his bride. Because she's the symbol of the church, and the church is the bride of Christ. How do we summarize the whole Bible? God wants to marry us. And that marriage was consummated on the marriage bed of the cross. And it will be brought to a fulfillment in eternity. We are destined for ecstasy in union with God forever. When we understand this, my brothers and sisters, we understand the meaning of our sexuality. The two are called to become one flesh, to be an icon, a sign here on planet Earth that's meant to point us to the infinite reality. But when we fail to see the infinite ecstasy we're created for, we start to worship the icon. And when we worship the icon becomes an idol. Sin, this is what sin is. It is misdirected or squashed desire. Salvation is redirected desire according to God's design, so we launch to our destiny, and that destiny is eternal union with God. Why are we no longer given in marriage in the resurrection? Because you no longer need a sign to point you to the ultimate marriage when the ultimate marriage has come. And now we can understand why Christ calls some to be celibate for the kingdom. Could I ask the consecrated celibates to stand for a moment? If you're a consecrated celibate, just stand in your place. These are married men and women. These men have married the church. These women have married Christ. They are living out the ultimate plan of God, which is union with Him. They're saying to the world, heaven is real, and it is worth selling everything to possess. They're saying, don't confuse the sign, the union of man and woman, with the ultimate reality. Are you hearing what they're saying to the world? They're not saying sex is bad. They're saying sex is just a little glimmer of the infinite union for which we're all created. Can we show them our appreciation? I want to share one more gem with you, and then we're going to bring this plane in for a landing and return to the bacon. Now, Jesus himself said, we must distinguish between the wise and the unwise virgins. What's the difference? The wise virgins had oil for their lamps. In other words, their lamps were lit on fire. Christ came to set the world on fire. The unwise virgins had no oil for their lamps. Their hearts had grown cold. They approached the virginal life or the celibate life as a life of repression, the life of the Stoic. They weren't living the mystical union. Let me show you one of the church's greatest examples of a wise virgin. Can we get that close-up of Teresa of Avila? Are you familiar with this statue of Bernini? You'll find this in a church outside Rome. It's called the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa of Avila. My brothers and sisters, this is a woman who knew passion, yearning, and desire. And through the journey of the interior life, she had learned how to redirect her desire according to God's design, and she was aimed at her destiny. And stammering to put this experience in words, she says it's nuptial union. She said, I tasted even here and now what awaits us in the other life, the consummation of the marriage of the Lamb. Now, obviously, my brothers and sisters, none of this means that God is sexual. God is not sexual. But rather, our sexuality gives us a little sense, a little glimmer, a little picture of the inner mystery of divine life and love. Teresa of Avila is one example among many of men and women who on planet Earth learned how to open their yearning for the infinite toward the infinite, and the infinite showed up. Can we go back to that image? My brothers and sisters, this is not just the experience of some mystic that is far removed from the Christian life. No. This is an image for us of our ultimate destiny, where we're all headed. John Paul II says the grandiose goal of all evangelization is mystical union with God. The grandiose goal of all evangelization, the very reason the church exists, is to invite the world to this union with God. Let's go back to something I said at the beginning. The devil doesn't have his own clay. Pornography is the devil's diabolic mockery of this sacred, holy ecstasy. All he can do is take God's clay and... My brothers and sisters, let's see how we're going to bring this in for a landing. Pope Francis says, humanity has a deep religious sense. We must examine this more closely, he says, in order to enter into a dialogue with the world, like that of the Lord and the Samaritan woman at the well. Why did she come to this well? Because she was thirsty. Jesus knows where she's taking her thirst. To all these men. Why is sex the number one idol? In all of human history, it's the number one idol. Why? Because in the Bible, it's the number one icon of the divine mystery. And all the devil can do is mock. We mistake the sign of eternity for the eternity we're looking for. We mistake the sign of the fulfillment we long for the fulfillment we long for. And in doing so, we turn the icon into an idol. This woman was taking her thirst for infinite love and perfect love to all these men. How many men had she been with? 6. She had been married 5 times, and the guy she was with now was not her husband. Does Jesus condemn her? Does he scold her? Does he shame her? Does he throw a rule book at her? Does he start preaching the 10 Commandments to her? What does he say to her? Listen to what he says. If you knew the gift that I wanted to give you, you would ask me for a drink, and I would give you a water that if you drink it, you will never thirst again. That is the model par excellence of evangelization, the redirecting of desire from idols to the reality for which we yearn. 6, she had been with 6 men. 6 is the imperfect biblical number. What's the perfect biblical number? Who was her 7th lover? And when she encountered this love, what did she do? She ran into the town and said, "Here are all the rules, you better follow them." What did she say? "Come meet the man who knows everything about me and loves me." That, my brothers and sisters, is the fragrance of the gospel. It's a fragrance that if we're asleep, and a lot of us are, if we're asleep, that fragrance will wake us up. The wedding feast is cooking right now. And it's wafting from heaven's kitchen down into time. And if we're aware of it, it's wafting up our nostrils even right now. And it should be waking us up. The fragrance of the gospel is the fragrance of divine love. It's the fragrance of divine mercy. It's the fragrance of the heart of God opened up and poured out for a humanity that longs for Him and doesn't even know it. It's a merciful heart. It's a compassionate heart. It's not throwing a rule book at people. It's inviting people to this feast. And what kind of feast is it? A wedding feast. You see, God wanted this eternal marital plan to be so plain to us, so obvious to us, He stamped an image of it right in our bodies. That's why our bodies are not only biological, they're theological. And the more we enter into the mystery of the theology of the body, the more we understand the very heart of the gospel as an invitation to infinite ecstasy in the satisfaction of all the desires of our heart in union with the God who has always loved us and never stopped loving us. My brothers and sisters, wake up and smell the bacon. Wake up and smell the wedding feast and go out into the main streets and invite everyone to this wedding feast. Amen?